Hi everyone, and welcome to WMAM's Masterclass series. Hold on a second. So just a friendly reminder, everyone, the session will be recorded, so please advise you to keep yourself muted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it on the chat box, and our speakers and panelists will get to your questions during the session. So welcome once again, everyone, and we will begin.
Hi. Hello.
Shortly. Hi, sorry, I'm going to mute you because the session is being recorded. Yeah, thank you. So without further ado, please let me welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Rob Bressler. He is the sustainable specialist and a chartered waste manager who has been working at the forefront of resource efficiency innovations since 2006. Working as a waste and environment consultant, Rob has grown an extensive network within the waste management and association technology sectors, gaining a deep understanding of waste management and associated waste management supply chains. Through his work on the National Industry Symbiosis Program, NISP, a precursor to many circular economy initiatives, he facilitated the diversion of over 1 million tons of material that were otherwise destined for landfills. As a technical director, Rob has been applying his consultancy expertise to develop software to support a broad spectrum of organizations to become more sustainable via enhanced data reporting, compliance appraisals, behavior change programs, public sector organizations such as National Health Service, universities and government departments, as well as a broad spectrum of blue chip companies have been assisted in assessing both the environment and financial impacts of implementing alternative practice and processes to their operations. Without further ado, please let me welcome Mr. Rob to speak.
Many thanks. Thanks for the introduction.
Hold on, I'll mute. Sorry,
yeah,
guys.
It's okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be presenting to you all today. So what I'll be doing today is just providing an insight to net zero and what that can mean for the WMAM membership. Would you like me to go into the presentation now, or are you going to introduce the panel?
Yeah, no, you can go on with your presentation first, and then I'll introduce the panel later.
No problem. So I'll share my screen. So yes, as mentioned, hopefully you can all see my screen now. Yes, I'm Rob Bressler, Technical Director at Rio. We're a software platform looking at sustainable management that provides a platform for training, appropriate governance and data management. So I'll get on with the presentation. So the reason of today is to talk about net zero and what that means. As you're probably all aware, there's the Conference of the Parties, the 26th meeting in Glasgow this year. So COP26 as it's known. So that's starting next month. So there's a flurry of activity and interest in net zero and what that means. So the COP26 has been announced as potentially one of our last chances to really fix some of the global issues that we have in terms of climate change and reducing our emissions. So a key part of the conference will be to ensure that we can meet our Paris Agreement measures, and that is to limit global warming to below 2 degrees and aim for a 1.5 degree of global warming, which means globally the whole world has to be carbon neutral by 2050. So there's a lot of work to do to get there. So I'm going to kind of frame net zero, what it means, but also I don't think it does any harm to kind of remind us why this is such an urgent and pertinent issue. So I'm just going to show a short clip that came from the IPCC panel for us to view.
A code red for humanity. The UN warns in a landmark report that human activity is changing the climate in unprecedented and sometimes irreversible ways.
The world listened, but didn't hear.
The world listened, but it did not act strongly enough. And as a result, climate change is a problem that is here now. Nobody's safe, and it's getting worse faster.
Raging wildfires in Greece, one of many countries already feeling the impact. The flames fanned by strong winds and rising temperatures. Meanwhile, a huge wildfire in Northern California is now the second largest in the state's history, with thousands of people forced out of their homes. The Dixie Fire has been burning for more than 26 days, and more than 5,000 firefighters are trying to contain it. It has consumed hundreds of buildings and threatens thousands more. 11 other major wildfires are also burning in California. Well, there's lots of information and articles.
Well, I think we'll get the picture. We can understand what that issue is. I don't want to be all too doom and gloom. Today is about what we can do, how we can affect things, and how we can change things. But when it comes to carbon management and net zero, there are a lot of different terminologies that are bandied about, and I think it's very important to ensure we all know what we're talking about when we're talking about net zero and what we mean by carbon neutrality. So I've got a slide here that's just going to kind of explain some of the details. So first of all, what is being carbon neutral? What does that actually mean? So being carbon neutral, as you'd expect, it means that the emissions that the planet produces have got to be absorbed by other means, whether that be planting trees, sequestering carbon. It's all making sure that everything is in a fine balance. Through human activity, we're vastly out of balance at the moment. Our emissions are not being absorbed quick enough. So that's what carbon neutrality means, and that's where we need to be as a planet by 2050. Absolute zero. So this is an interesting one. When companies say they want to become absolute zero, it's a strange terminology. It means you're not making any emissions whatsoever, but we know that's just physically not possible. So there's certain things where you can't. Well, I'd be very surprised if anyone here has an absolute zero organization. It's not something that's really physically possible. What we really need to do, and to ensure that we can get to net zero, is to look at science-based targets. And science-based targets looks at actually getting to the point where we can hit this below 2 degrees or 1.5 degree warming. So the key thing that we all need to do is to make sure that we are cutting emissions now, so we can ensure that we have an opportunity to offset those emissions later on. So a science-based target requires us to reduce our emissions as much as we possibly can to get us to that point, and then look to actually get to a net zero carbon by ensuring that we've got a gross negative emissions. So this can be through offsets, tree planting, carbon sequestration. So it's making sure that all of these things in balance. But the only way we're going to do that is by reducing these emissions here. And then we've got these other terms, which are carbon positive and carbon negative. They can be interchangeable, but the idea is that you're actually absorbing more carbon than you are emitting. So this is where we really need to start moving towards if we really want to start reversing some of the major issues that we're facing with climate change. So this is some of the projections that we have. We can see where we are now and the trajectory we've been on, but this demonstrates the huge amount of work that has to be undertaken to actually get to this level of 1.5 degrees. We know that if we don't get to this below 2 degrees, some of these issues could be quite catastrophic and irreversible. So there's a lot that needs to be done in a very short period of time. So I'm not too familiar with Malaysia, but I was doing some research and just seeing where Malaysia is in terms of its readiness and preparedness for meeting its net zero commitments. KPMG, a very large respected consultancy, did a lot of research. They looked at 32 leading nations around the world and rated them and where they were in the net zero journey. Malaysia was 21st out of 32 countries, so quite a way down on the list. And some of the key issues for Malaysia that were noted were its reliance on oil and gas and palm oil production, and the fact that the majority of electricity comes from coal and gas, and the fact that your fuel, gasoline, is actually heavily subsidized, swaying the issues and potentially preventing people from reducing. So Malaysia has got some very strong commitments to meet its net zero targets. It's looking to reduce its current emissions by 45% by 2030, and again, reaching this global neutrality by 2050. And as part of all of this, there'll be carbon pricing and taxing being brought in before long. And there's also a commitment to build no new coal power plants. And there's also investments coming through for green technology and finance schemes. I also looked at what this means in terms of the impact for Malaysia if things don't go well. So again, looking at the gross domestic product in terms of what this may mean for Malaysia if it doesn't meet its targets, it was quite surprising that it actually could be one of the most heavily hit countries around the world. It gets 48 out of 48, as in being the bottom of the table if things don't go wrong. If things do go wrong. So some of the issues for Malaysia, some of the key issues is the amount of the fluctuation and the heat stress Malaysia will be, how this will affect your food production and crops, and also the knock-on impact of what that will have in terms of tourism. So there's some very significant issues for Malaysia if it doesn't help and the globe doesn't help Malaysia hit these targets. So how do we get there? How do we do these things and how do we measure it? So what we need to do is look at science-based targets. Science-based targets are the best means to measure, monitor and track your global emissions. And again, this is looking at how you can get to these emissions over the correct period of time and how you can really start to make an impact rather than looking at things like offsetting. So you have to create your near-term targets. What can you do in the next 5 to 10 years to drastically reduce your carbon, and then start looking how you can decarbonize in the longer term. So I urge you to have a look at the Science-Based Targets protocol and what that means for your organization. So Rio ESG, we've written a short guide on the 10 steps that you can take as an organization to meet your net zero ambitions. And I'm going to quickly just go through some of these points as part of this presentation. So a key part of this is getting the message out there and ensuring that your staff, your organizations, your stakeholders are understanding of the issue and they're educated. So part of this training session today, it looks at this education and learning. And we also provide some sort of training content as well that may be of interest. But the key thing is defining the scope of your carbon footprint first. So you need to understand what is in your control. So you have scope 1 emissions. So these are the emissions that you are under your direct control from your fuel use, from emissions from things like methane, stuff that you buy in and you are emitting. So that's your scope 1. Then we have scope 2, which are your indirect emissions. So this can be the emissions that are resulting from your electricity use or things along your supply chain from your vehicle fleet. So these are actually emissions that are indirect, but you have the control of and things that you can do there. And then we have scope 3. So this is all to do with things like your supply chain, the materials that you're buying in, all the subsequent emissions that relate to you, to people that you engage with. So there's a real need to be looking at scope 3. A lot of organizations can cut their own fuel, they can reduce their own fleet, but what they really need to be looking at is the impact of their entire supply chain, because a majority of your emissions can be resulting from those areas. So you really need to dig into that detail. So once you've understood where your impact is, what you can do, you need to start gathering as much data as possible and seeing where the greatest opportunity for cutting that carbon is. So you need to look at things like your electricity usage, your waste production disposal, your natural gas use, your water use, your logistics, all the fuels, any refrigeration gases, CFCs, and any other kind of district heating systems. So you need to make sure you're gathering as much of that data as possible from as many sources as possible and verifying it and checking that it's accurate. Once you've got that information, you can then start applying the greenhouse gas conversion factors to see where your biggest carbon footprint is. And then that will help you frame how you can start attacking these different areas, what you can do to make the most impact in the shortest time possible. So to actually make this happen for your organization, you're going to have to start creating a policy, a strategy, and setting some targets. So this is, setting smart, measurable targets. What can you do? What can be measured? and are they time-based? Can you do this within the time that is required to hit these very stringent goals? If you don't set ambitious targets, we're never going to reach the 1.5 degree warming we have to do. So we have to be very ambitious here. So I think we can discuss some of these in the panel today, but for your organizations, you know best what you can do yourselves, rather than me telling you. But there may be opportunities for you to change your fleet, move to battery powered vehicles, use different sources of energy. Have you the ability to use solar power? Can you look at more circular supply chains? Move from a linear model, as you're very familiar with, and start looking at better ways of handling and using different materials, but also ensuring that your supply chain are aware of this. As a procuring organization, you have the ability to write contracts to make sure that your suppliers are reducing their carbon as much as possible when providing their goods and services to you. And then once you've got your emissions as low as possible, then you have to look at how can you then offset the remaining of your carbon footprint. What can you do to sequester that carbon and make sure that it's being pulled out of the atmosphere? As an organization, you're always going to be emitting. You're always going to be moving your vehicles. You're going to be traveling. There will be emissions from your organization. But how can you then do good with that? Can you actually start looking at offsetting by doing different offsetting projects, such as tree planting, or looking at alternative fuels, or buying renewable energy certificates from energy suppliers, so we can make sure that we can transition from a coal and gas fired process to more renewable energy sources. But I think what's really important is making sure that these offsets are valid and true. There are a lot of offsetting organizations out there. Some are better than others. So it's really important that you look at what they call gold standard offsetting schemes to make sure that they're fully audited, fully verified, and they're not reselling the same offsets. So it's really, really important as a procurer of these offsets that you're confident they're going to be doing what you need to do. The other thing as well, there's a term here called insets. So these are things that you can do as an organization for yourself. Do you have the ability to sequester carbon in some ways within your own organization, with your own land, to regenerate different things so you can actually reduce the carbon emissions yourselves and take control of that? And then finally, it's all about communicating and tracking of all of this. So to make sure that your stakeholders are aware of the work that you're doing, demonstrating that you're on track, ensuring that your workforce are aware and on board with the program. So it's really important when you're setting these targets and gathering this data that you're feeding this information back to as many people as possible. As we know, investors are very keen on this subject area now. So if you're looking to raise funds and develop as an organization, you need to make sure that the investors in your organization are confident that you've got a long-term future and you're going to be meeting all of these targets. So it's really important to look at this data and track and see how you're getting on. It's important to see if you're meeting your targets or if you're not, and then actually acting on that. Doing an annual carbon report doesn't cut it anymore, because you could have been emitting and having issues 6 months prior to your report being finalized. So it's important you actually can look at this data in real time as much as possible. But it's not all doom and gloom. It doesn't have to always be an expense. There are lots of benefits from actually reaching net zero. By being efficient, you can save money. You can cause less waste. You can be a leaner organization. You may not, if you can tidy up your collection mechanisms, you may not need as many vehicles. You may not need so much fuel. By understanding your supply chains and having strong tenders and being clear what you want from your supply chain, you can be more resilient and more robust and get better contracts. By being a more responsible organization, you can reduce your overheads and your risk, which can bring down your insurance premiums. As I said before, investor confidence. By being a lean and efficient and environmentally conscious organization, it's going to be easier to raise funds and grow your business. And also, by reducing your carbon emissions now, the cost of offsetting those carbon in the future and the carbon taxes that are coming your way will be cheaper. So from our point of view, a lot of organizations come to us and just say, we want to be net zero. How can I do it? Can I just pay to do this? Can I click this button? it's not that easy. There's lots and lots of work for you to do within your own organization to make this happen. You know your business and your supply chain better than anybody else, but it's about getting the right mindset, and it's not always going to be easy. So there's a lot of work to do. Thank you for your time. I hope that was of interest, and I'll hand back to the panel.
Thank you so much, Rob. Very interesting presentation. We will then move, will you be staying for the panel session?
Of course.
Okay. So I'll pin all the panelists and I'll introduce Puan Sharifa, who would then help with the session. She will be moderating it. 1 second. Okay, let me introduce Puan Sharifa. She is a civil engineer by profession and holds a degree in civil engineering from the University of Southwestern Louisiana, USA, and a master's degree in environmental engineering from UTM Johor. She has more than 22 years of experience in environmental fields, including 19 years in solid waste management. And she first joined Langhorst Environmental and Wastewater as an environmental engineer. Later on, she joined an environmental consultancy company, Highcom Environmental, in May 1996, and then Alam Flora Sdn Bhd in 1997. She was the head of R&D department in Alam Flora Sdn Bhd, and currently was the head of corporate planning of DRB Highcom Environmental Services Sdn Bhd, which is wholly owned by Alam Flora. She is currently now the consultant in AMPM International Sdn Bhd, and was key in setting up the Waste Management Association of Malaysia, WMAM. And until today, she is still very active in WMAM activities, and currently the chairman for the Training and Development Committee. She was also appointed as a technical expert for the Green Tech Financing Scheme proposal evaluation, and has been actively participating in development of Malaysian standards on solid waste and national occupational skill standards. So Puan, I'll pass the floor to you, and you can invite the panelists as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. Hope everyone is doing well today. Okay, we are glad that we have an experienced panelist and a speaker for this session. When I total up the experience, actually we have more than 100 years. So we have very high accumulative experience. So please take this opportunity to ask questions, because we have all the experience and expert in the area of carbon net zero. It's also a new term for me, carbon net zero. So maybe for the participant, you can also put in the chat that if this is your first time you listen to carbon net zero, you can type 1 in the chat. But if you have listened it before, you can type 2. So at least we know that, our participants' background today. All right. Okay. So we have panelists today. Okay. Number 1, we have Mr. Robert Birch. He's an environmental consultant, EcoSolace UK and Malaysia. Yeah, he's an entrepreneur that has built, led, and sold many fast growth companies in innovation and technology. So a natural path that leads to delivering real change for the greater good using those same principles. Heavily engaged in the water sector through AL Technology Company, FIDO. A commitment to developing world-class solutions to reduce waste and to eliminate chemical or toxic use. Yeah, we need this experience in Malaysia. And then the EcoSolace International Group is actually an international environmental services, manufacturing and consultancy organization committed to restoring the ecosystem, transforming waste, reducing the damage to the environment, and promoting innovative and environmentally responsible solutions. So it has offices in Malaysia, so very close to us, and works with many organizations in the region to embrace innovation and new biotech to reduce carbon. So maybe we can have Mr. Robert Birch just to show your hand. Okay. All right. So next panelist is actually Dr. Walid. He is the director circular learning, also from UK. He is a chartered waste manager. and chartered environmentalist with 20 years in environmental, waste and resources management, as well as the circular economy. So these are the experts that we are looking for. So Dr. Montasir is a director of circular learning and owner or founder of IRIMS Limited UK with clients in the UK and internationally. He has been involved in projects and studies with various waste and environmental organizations in the UK, such as DEFRA, REPT, and internationally with UNIDO, HP, and abroad such as UNIDO, ITC, wow, very long list, Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency, and Tadwir. So a key contributor and delegate of the EU mission to Chile. The mission aimed to share EU best practices in municipal solid waste management with key stakeholders. So this included meeting with stakeholders and delivering a public workshop discussing the future of waste management in Chile. So we can have similar workshop for waste management in Malaysia. So Dr. Montasir was also the coordinator of a circular economy working group at RISERB project 2014-2018. RISERB project was supported by UNESCO Chair on sustainability and aims to help facilitate knowledge to government and universities. Walid was also part of e-waste extended e-waste extended producer responsibility working group in Nigeria with stakeholders such as HP, Dell, UNIDO and Nestria. So the group aimed to enhance the e-waste management. I think we also looking at this e-waste management, especially the household e-waste management. So Walid is currently working on consultancy tasks in several locations of waste management. And now he is actually, we have a collaboration with Walid, with WMAM. So we should have more programs with Walid later on. Okay, the next panelist. Okay, she's a Malaysian, beautiful lady, Carol Lee. She's the Safety, Health, Environment and Sustainability League Dutch Lady Industry Berhad. So I can say that she is the Iron Lady of Dutch Lady. So Carol Lee starts with DLMI, Dutch Lady Malaysia Industries Berhad, in 2017, quite long ago, and from reduction of carbon footprint, increased energy and water efficiency, as well as zero landfill. Oh, okay, so we should learn from Dutch Lady how they make zero landfill, so we can have, the sharing session with other industries as well. She and her team received the National Energy and Green Technology Award, NECTA 2018, from Ministry of Energy, Green Technology and Water. It was KETA previously, by optimizing and upgrading the machine and equipment, improving the operation process and technology, implementing 4R, 4R, rethink, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Not just 3R, we start with 4R, rethink. So rethink before you generate the waste, and also innovation. So Carol also governances and leads the DLMI Sustainability Roadmap 2028 to deliver a nourishing, a better planet vision. Wow, I think Dutch Lady have gone very advanced. They already have Roadmap 2028. So, so we are lucky today that we have all these panelists and also our keynote speaker. So let us ask a few questions. All right. Okay. Maybe we can start with Mr. Robert Birch. Okay. And then we go to Walid and then Carol. Okay. Okay. What does carbon net zero mean to you?
Want me to go first?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. The World Bank tell all the banks in the world that the most important thing we must have is water. Water is our greatest natural asset. If we don't look after it, we won't survive as a race. So a lot of time, money and effort is going into water management. Just going to give you a couple of facts and figures. Most water companies in the world lose half their water after they've processed it through leakage. The cost of replacing that water is in the billions, and it represents 1% of all the carbon ever produced in the world is responsible for the replacement of water due to leakage. That's how serious it is. We've developed some technology that will help water companies find those leaks underground to within a few centimeters. So there's no more time wasting, as you can imagine. The reason that we have to save our water is because we have water scarcity. And if you lose water, you can't feed agriculture, and it's not available to, for argument's sake, the firefighters. You begin to see the problem. On the other side, we need to consider how we treat wastewater. It's traditionally a very, very expensive and carbon intensive process. Billions of tons of wastewater are transported on our roads every single day. This water is toxic, it's poisonous, and it's transferred from one process to another. This is ridiculous. So we've developed ways of digesting all the pollutants and the waste and the contamination in situ where the water is, no need to transport it, no carbon produced whatsoever. We do this with bacterium, natural bacterium. So let's use nature to save nature. And we've also developed some bacterium that can capture carbon out of water and out of soil and the atmosphere. So there's lots of things people are working on. I don't have a presentation, but if anyone has any questions, I'll happily do my best to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Okay, yeah, it's very important. Water is very important. Not for us in Malaysia, we, like in one of our states, we actually frequently face of water shortage. So it is very important to look into the technology to preserve the water or to protect the water sources. Okay, so let's go to the next panelist, Dr. Walid.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Same question, Pan Sarifa, is that correct?
Yeah. What does carbon net zero mean to you? Yeah.
It's a very interesting question, I have to say, Pan Sarifa. And thank you very much for inviting me for this event. Good morning, everyone from the UK, or good afternoon in Malaysia because of the timing now. I think it's very interesting to say what is, net carbon or zero carbon, or as Rob has mentioned in his presentation. Whatever the terminology we're going to use, we are looking into the reduction of carbon. Why we have to look into that? Why we need to reduce the carbon? We know already now, the science has proved, and the events around us have already shown what does it mean if we continue business as usual. So I can see that, for example, that net zero, and putting that in essence as a number, is not a challenge, but also an opportunity. So we as individuals, business leaders, business community, government, policymakers, understands what are the challenges and opportunities we need to do. For me, net zero carbon is an opportunity for businesses, for governments to change the way we have been working, not only in the last 2-3 decades, but I would say since we started the Industrial Revolution. Just we take stuff, we make stuff, and then we throw it away, or we use the normal fossil fuels because that's the easiest way of producing energy or getting the energy. For me, net zero carbon is an opportunity for us to change the way we think, change the way we do the business, change the way we deliver our goods, our services as a business, or even as individual in our day-to-day life. So I see that as an opportunity, and hence it's a responsibility for everyone to educate ourselves what we really need in order to tackle the climate change issue, reduce our carbon emissions as individual or as a business, because continuous business as usual, and this short video, what Rob has showed even in his presentation, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Every day, and I'm sure in Malaysia has the same thing, in the UK, we're suffering from the same thing as well. It's not one country is suffering that, it's all of us in different degrees, in different timing, and it will impact us if we don't do anything in the timing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Walid. It's very true. It has to be very comprehensive from all aspects. We have to change the way we do things. with the way we do business and also our culture. All right. So, okay, next panelist, Carol, please.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. For me, net zero is very like accounting word, and it's actually really it's same understanding and same philosophy. How much that we get paid or how much is our income, then our spending need to be balanced. We cannot overspend. If you overspend, then you need to reduce. So two keywords over here for a manufacturer is we need to balance our input and output. And if we feel like we know that our output or the emissions that we have overspent, then you need to reduce. So two keywords over here is balance and reduce.
Yeah, that's easy to remember. So go back to accounting. Don't spend more than your income. So that was a net zero. If you generate more carbon, you have to reduce, to look at ways how to reduce to make it net zero. Okay, maybe I can also ask one more question to our keynote speaker, Mr. Bob Bressler. What does carbon net zero mean to you personally?
Yeah, I think I'll exactly as Carol said, is accounting. We really need to understand it's a net zero, so we need to understand what is out there and what we've got to put away, and we can't do that unless we get the numbers. So it's really, really important that we understand what our carbon debt is. How do we know what it is? Have we measured it? Have we got good data? Do we understand the supply chain? Without measuring that, we can't really ever know if we're doing the right thing or not. So net zero to me is about that accounting. It's really understanding things like embodied carbon and all those ongoing impacts. So I think that's the start, but we need to move quick.
Yes. So Mr. Rob, since you mentioned about we have to measure our carbon, maybe you can enlighten us a bit and the participants. How do we measure our carbon? How do we start?
Yeah, I mean, measuring your carbon is what you need to know is things like, from your procurement team, do you know exactly how much fuel you're purchasing? What type of fuel that is? Are you aware of or do you know which conversion factor we need to apply to that fuel? So when you burn so many liters of gasoline, what does that mean in terms of a carbon output? When you've got methane leaking from a landfill site, what impact that has? Do you know what the appropriate carbon conversion factor is to apply to that emission? Things like when you're procuring new goods and materials. Is this a virgin feedstock? Are you using virgin aluminium, which has a 2,000 times greater footprint than recycled aluminium? So it's really understanding all of these different impacts and where they are. So you have to actually do a full accountancy of your business operations, what it uses, what it disposes, and what it emits, and then use the appropriate conversion factors that are appropriate to Malaysia to see where the biggest problem is, attack those first, and then gradually move to the lower areas. So it's a very large accounting exercise.
Yeah, that's a very great tips given by Mr. Rob. So maybe Mr. Robert Birch can continue on that based on your experience on how to actually calculate carbon from water treatment or water management.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. The electricity used in processing water, making fresh water and recycling wastewater is enormous. I mean, trillions of pounds, trillions of dollars are spent a year on this. It's not efficient. Most of it is wasted. Half of the water ever produced is wasted, and that has to be dealt with. The cost to the planet is enormous. But then we have to look at what we do with our water. If we're going to waste it, then we have to accept there's a massive carbon overhead there. The other thing we need to consider is what do we do with our water? Well, most people just pollute it. If you look at the billions of tons of plastic in our oceans, you'll realize we're just abusing our natural asset. The other thing we need to consider is, Rob, you mentioned carbon in landfill sites. Let me just think about landfill sites for a minute. Landfill sites have been around for 50 years and we dump all our rubbish on them. Over the years, the organic waste decomposes and it should then be able to decompose, and we can close it off and build upon it. But what nobody knows, of course, is what happens to plastic. How does it decompose? We don't know. We don't know how it's going to decompose. If you were to take a plastic wrapper or a plastic bucket or something made of plastic and bury it in the ground and dig it up 100 years later, it may not have decomposed. It may still be there. But what we're finding from landfill sites is as our waste decomposes, we create something called leachate. Leachate is highly toxic. It's more toxic than sulfuric acid. And it comes from the decomposition of food and plastic and wood and textiles. And it's a liquid, and it's collected underneath the landfill site, and it then goes into a pool, and we don't know what to do with it. And what most governments do is they transport it by road. If you knew what this was, trust me, you wouldn't want this in your road. It's highly dangerous stuff. And it's taken away, and I don't know whether it's incinerated or centrifuged, but anyway, it's decomposed. And it's highly dangerous. And we need to do something about this. This is a global problem. We've developed bacteria that digest the waste. And I'm not here to promote what we're doing, but we've got to constantly look at ways that we deal with the waste that we're producing. You know, we as a planet must be responsible for the waste that we create. And there's got to be better ways to manage it, because if we don't, we will create a level of toxicity that's not sustainable. The race won't survive with this level of toxicity. Can't hear you, Rob.
Yeah, I think one of the key things there is having local solutions. You know, from the carbon footprinting work that we do with many of our clients, it's the transport and logistics side is a huge footprint. It's the movement of those vehicles, it's the fuel that's spent doing it. So yeah, where you can do things in situ, where you don't have to export and transport waste. So the UK is terrible at that. You know, we are very, very guilty of exporting our materials and not taking control of what we should be doing. And you know, just making it someone else's problem. And there's a lot we can do. You know, we're buying in these virgin oil materials to make new stuff when we've got this massive resource. So I think the local solutions and being a slightly smaller scale and what we can do is very important, because there's huge amounts of fuel wastage transporting materials unnecessarily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true also, especially when we have a concept of transfer stations. We are actually, you know, it's like double carbon emission for transporting and also disposing at the landfill on a longer distance. So maybe Walid, you also want to say something?
Yeah, just following what Rob and Robert was saying, and I absolutely agree, because one of the things, like Robert was mentioning about landfill, for example, the waste sector as a waste management sector, for example, the EU considered them as the fourth largest emitter of carbon. After combustion of fuel, it's like almost 77% of the EU emission of carbon, then followed by agriculture and then industrial activities. And the waste management sector, in terms of especially with the landfill and landfill management, especially the old landfill, I'm not talking about what's happening now, we were emitting methane, which is higher actually impact on global warming and climate change. And despite this has been an impact from the waste management, because this is what have been doing, just, you know, whatever waste, just dump it and put it into the ground. And that's basically the waste we have been dumping all the years before we start doing the 3 Rs, or even, as Carol said, the 4 Rs. So basically, we've been dumping the waste into the landfill, cover it and forget about it. We didn't know about what we can do with this. Now we have changed, and this is really good that the science has showed us, and that technical abilities within the waste management sector have changed dramatically in the last 10-15 years, especially with the introduction of recycling targets, introduction of zero to landfill targets. And I don't mean that by zero, like no waste to landfill, but at least to reduce the landfill, the waste to landfill dramatically, increase recycling, increase awareness. And one of the things, for example, I've seen in the 12th Malaysian plan, for example, increase recycling for the national targets, which is coming into effect as we speak. And this is very interesting, because doing more recycling in Malaysia, doing more recycling any part of the world, meaning that we reduce the carbon, we reduce the amount of organic waste into landfill, which we can produce methane. We actually reduce amount of energy we're using for transport goods, for example, because we can use local resources. We can use reuse or recycle, which we actually can reduce the amount of carbon rather than using virgin material. So as everybody knows, we always use that example as even for the children in the schools. If you recycle 1 ton of aluminium, you actually reduce 97% of the carbon and energy you wanted to use, for example, for extracting the same ton of aluminium from the ground. That is a huge saving and a huge actually reduction in carbon, and that is where we want to start working on.
I think one of the key things with the landfill issue is is getting out of that food waste. Is the organic matter, as we know that is the stuff that decomposes quickly and produces methane, which is 20 times worse as a carbon emitter than carbon dioxide. So if we can pull that food waste out and use that as an energy source, there's a lot of work in the UK with anaerobic digestion. We can capture that methane. We can utilize that as a fuel to run the vehicles and close some loops. But not only is pulling out that food waste and that organic matter beneficial from a carbon perspective, but it's also regenerating the nutrients. We're stripping the soils in our countries by fast growing crops and not rejuvenating the soils. I think in the UK there's about 20 crop cycles left before all of our soils won't be able to grow anything anymore. So it's about making those circular loops as well, and it's common sense. We've got the technology, we just need to move quicker.
Yes, can I also add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
A point both Waleed and Rob made, and thank you for that. We need to just consider where we are with agriculture. Now, as you quite rightly, Rob, said, if we keep applying synthetic, artificial chemicals into our land, we will turn the land infertile. We won't be able to grow anything. Now, farmers are under enormous financial pressure to deliver record yield sizes, record crops, and they're under pressure by the supermarkets and the buyers. So they are now using record amounts of nitrates and phosphates to promote growth. These nitrates and phosphates wash into surface water, rivers, lakes, seas, oceans. And when you put nitrates and phosphates into water, there's a very easy symptom you can use to determine whether nitrates and phosphates are in water, because you get algae. So if you've got algae in water, it means it's full of nitrates and phosphates, because nitrates and phosphates are the food source for algae. If you've got algae in the water, it means it's being depleted of oxygen. If you deplete the water of oxygen, the marine life will die. You will make the water toxic, and that toxicity will go into the food chain. It goes into fish, shellfish, prawns, etc., and it will work its way up the food chain. In America, around the Gulf of Mexico now, there are hundreds of miles of coastline that are closed to the public. You might have seen green algae, you might have even seen blue algae, which is highly toxic. But in the Gulf of Mexico now, they've got red algae. It's called red tide. Please Google it after this. You'll be astonished what you see. Red tide is highly toxic. It kills humans, it kills animals, it completely kills marine life. And therefore, coastlines have to be closed. You can't allow people near it. You can't allow animals near it. You can't do any fishing near it. And of course, that has a running on effect, because of course it affects local businesses, restaurants, hotels, tourism, as you can well imagine. And if we don't get on top of it, it will spread. It will literally double in size every year. And what makes algae grow and become toxic is sunlight. It's photoefflorescent. It also survives on sunlight. And with global warming, you're now seeing record amounts of algae and algae toxicity in water. And as climate change accelerates, the amount of the water temperature in our oceans will increase, and it will generate a lot more algae growth than we've ever seen. And it will make some areas absolutely no-go areas, and you won't be able to have a fishing industry, just so you know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. Yeah, it's when you look at the impact, it's actually scary. It's actually scary. We have a reduction of our food source from the sea due to this human behavior of disposing waste and also nitrates and phosphates into our water body. So let us listen from Carol, because I think in 2017, she got this award, reduction of carbon footprint, increased energy and water efficiency, as well as zero landfill. So maybe you can share with us what are the efforts or initiatives done during that period, or maybe until now.
Okay, first of all, I think as a manufacturer, Dutch lady, we are responsible on end-to-end. So we look into the three factors: producer, processor, and the end user. We are the processor, so we need to work very closely with the producer, which is our supplier, and also deliver the knowledge and education to our end user. So that's awareness we also want to create to the market and consumer to accept green and to promote green. And as a processor, first of all, maybe we can start from a scope 1 to look into our own organization, our own factory, whichever products, every single product that we produce, how much of energy that you have used. That's his calculation. So you can use your usage of your gigajoule to divide the number of production that you have produced, and you will get the carbon footprint result. And from there, then you need to identify which machine that help to contribute and helps you to reduce the carbon footprint, which like refrigerator, your boiler, or those machines that generate heat and steam. So from there, in fact, you can do a lot of improvement, because machine maybe you purchased 10 years ago might be a very high consumption. Is like your fridge in your house. Maybe the old fridge take the high energy consumption, whereas now the equipment or the machine that we use, the tools that we use is much more energy efficiency. So you can look into that. So that's why, and in 2017 and 2018, in fact, we changed a lot of machines to make it more energy efficiency. And at the same time, that also can increase our efficiency in water. And also, you can, other than the machine, the hardware, you should also look into your process. Each of the process, like we are producing milk, we need to use a lot of water that we cannot avoid. That is actually our output. That's what just now the accounting said, that is the things that we need to produce. So how much that we need to reduce is actually the wastage. So from the wastage, from there you can control the optimization on your process, and also the cleaning process. How can you control the water for the cleaning process? And also, last thing, you might also need to look into the behavior of the staff, how they use the water. And we also launched a program called One Day, One Leak. Proactively, we get everyone to inspect every day for a leakage. So the leakages actually help us to also reduce a lot, because other than investment, I think this is the most effective way for us to detect the leakages. So this is how we do the carbon footprint from begin. And now we extend to the scope 3, which we also engage with only sustainable supplier to help us to look into the packaging, sustainability. And because if our material, our supply of packaging is sustainable, then it's actually helping us to reduce the carbon footprint as well. And for landfill, in fact, a lot of things we can actually dispose, a lot of ways that we can dispose our waste. In fact, like us, our food waste, we actually send over for fertilizer. Our sludge, we send over for fertilizer. And also the milk powder, the defect milk powder, we can also send for the animal feed. So those areas, we try to reuse and recycle the things as much as we can to make it every single product or every single things, the shelf life is actually longer than what we expect initially. So we based on that perspective to see how can we reduce more in our carbon footprint, which we might also need to look into the other alternative of source of energy, for example, solar, biomass. So that is actually enhanced step after you can settle. The first step is like, how do you maintain your usage internally first? Then you can move to the next steps.
Yeah, great, Carol. I think one day, one leak, it sounds so simple to be done. So this one is to be done at across the company level, correct? That's good. So since in the beginning you mentioned about accounting, okay, I want to relate this to accounting as well. So since your efforts or initiative to reduce the carbon footprint, does it increase your cost or does it affect your bottom line?
Of course, cost is always for the setup and maintenance. Because example, if I want to change the machine, cost is required, but that investment actually bring us back more benefit because the reliability of the machine, the maintenance of the machine actually will bring the productivity, more efficiency and effectiveness. So in fact, for long term, this is a very good investment for the long term. And I always like to bring actually this topic always park under continuous improvement, because I tell our operation excellence team this is always a continuously improvement for sustainability, because sustainability is not a aliens. It's not an investment or it's not a cost, but it's actually helping the company to do the continuous improvement.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, one question for you. I think since Dutch lady is using, I think a lot of Tetra Packs, how do you manage to recover back the Tetra Packs from the waste stream?
We are working very closely with Maria right now. Maria, we as an alliance, we are looking for several programs to do the recollection. We also put inside our package that this to make the awareness that this packaging is actually recyclable. And now is the time, the period that we need to educate our user. That's why just I also mentioned that we have producer, processor, and a user. So now education to the end user is very much important. And we can collect, I believe that we can collect a lot of what is that called, disposed packaging back if we have the cooperation from different parties. And also, we also looking for how to improve our packaging into 100% recyclable, because right now you know that straw is one of the hit topic. So we might also we're looking forward to dispose the straw and make it all the packaging is more sustainable.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Okay, maybe I go reverse now, Dr. Walid. How do we actually to make sure that, I mean, we want to implement carbon emission reduction, but how do we balance with the cost? How costly is to go green?
That's very interesting question, because all the companies we work with, for example, they always say, how much it will cost me? How much money do I need to pay? Why you have to do this? And this is one of the challenges, to be honest, for anyone who work in the environmental sector. When we talk with, especially with SMEs, with small and medium companies, because for them, cost is a big thing. So if you talk to corporate companies or multinational, for them, either this is part of innovation or development of their product. So it's coming along. So they don't see it as being green, but it's also benefit for them, even though it's a big cost as well. However, for small companies, if you say you want to change, for example, the way you burn fossil fuels, you're going to go, for example, from heavy oil to gas, or for example, use solar panels. So there is a bit of investment you need to do so. I always tell companies you have to look into your investment from two frontiers. One is, do you need that technology? Is that technology essential? You need to look into your process. And there are several stages you need to look into process, changing into, for example, your process, changing your the way you're working around your facility and so on. For example, are you having aware with people working with you about recycling? Is it actually can be recycled? Can you change, for example, your procurement process to be more green procurement? So these are the things you can do. What we call it a win-win, or quick wins, or low cost, and no cost solutions. Then you go to the next steps and you look into how much you're gonna spend money and your payback period. Okay, so for example, and when we're talking about the payback period, it's not just in money, because as Carol said earlier, it's not about accounting as well. Look into the benefits, the indirect benefits you will get for being green. Just looking back again, and I keep mentioning the 12th Malaysian plan, because this will put a lot of change within the businesses in Malaysia. So the green procurement, for example, by the government is going to increase to 25% by 2025, increase of recycling rate to be 40% by 2030, increase of the use of renewable energy by 2050, and being zero carbon net by 2050, carbon neutral by 2050. All of these targets means you need not to look how much money you're going to spend now, but look into the benefit you are going to be in the frontier of a company that can actually win contracts with your local and international businesses, or even your government. So looking into that, oh yes, I'm going to change that kit. It will cost me, let's say, $100 in Malaysian. How much that will be, let's say 4 or 5 times. But in the next 5 years, I know that I will be the first one. By that time, I achieve that time, I'm actually in front of my competitors, because actually I have that technology. I am being green. I am being actually ahead of the game. And this is the essence you have to look into, not how much you're going to pay now. No, it's how much you're going to gain in the future and how much you're going to be in front. Plus also the benefit you get, as Carol mentioned, for example, how much you're going to save in terms of like more efficient, more resource efficient, being cleaner, also reducing of your resources and being more resource efficient, and even reduction of your resource usage as well. So you're actually having the benefit, not only just as an accountant. The issue I see, as always, and this is always a challenge, all the business and business leaders and the CEOs, is not about just the figure. It's the 100 grand I'm going to pay. It's never about the 100 grand, because if it's about the 100 grand, we wouldn't do all the work we're doing now, investing all in renewable energy, government giving all the incentives in order to reduce the carbon, because in the end of the day, in 10, 20 years, if we don't do anything, we'll invest that money, basically, we're already on the tipping point of impacting all of us. So look at it from another stand. I'm doing this because I want to achieve something in the next 5, 7 years that will allow me to have my businesses still exist and being competitive with others.
Yeah, I like your comment on it's not about how much you spend now, it's about how much you will gain in future and how you actually advance from your competitor. Because this is going to be the direction, the way forward. Even the Malaysian government, have started the requirements of sustainability, green procurement. So it is actually a need, a business needs now. It's not the business needs in future. We have started now. So maybe Mr. Robert Birch, you want to comment anything on this about cost? Green cost? Cost to be green, Mr. Robert? Oh, okay, maybe Mr. Rob can start.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I kind of liken it to where we were with health and safety. Before health and safety was people weren't looking into it, but then they started to realise, the cost of people being off sick, the cost of injuries, the litigation, all of these things, and being moving, using the same logic, looking at risk, and the cost of not doing these things can be far, far greater, rather than the cost of implementing efficiencies. So I think people really need to consider what the bigger picture is. What is underneath the iceberg of the costs of not doing these things. And from our own point, and I know Carol, you mentioned things like leak detection and these kind of things. One of the companies we've been working with recently, a local authority, through using better monitoring and data capturing, they were able to identify a leak because they had good data they were able to see this leak was happening because their water usage went up, and they wouldn't have noticed unless there was someone there to analyze it and look at it. So they were able to save thousands of pounds very, very quickly. Without that monitoring, without that data, without that information, that would have continued to be a problem. We also have it with other organizations where they've been analyzing their data and they've seen that someone in their supply chain is overcharging them for waste collections or whatever else when the weights weren't right, and just having a handle on that data, but also understanding what that data means. So I think it's really key. And part of all of this is training, making sure that all the workforce knows what they're looking for, because it's those people on the ground, the people that are seeing the meters running up. But if you can tell them what impact that has, how it impacts them, how it impacts their work, how it impacts their job and impacts their community, they're likely to act on it. So you can make these efficiencies and save that money quicker. So it's a very much a solid payback if you can kind of nip these things in the bud.
Yeah, I think it's data is very important. It's very crucial. You need to start with your baseline data. Otherwise, how do you know where you want to improve? How do you know, how to reach the net carbon, the net zero, if you don't have the baseline? Okay, Mr. Robert, since you are back, Robert, maybe you can also share with us how to balance the cost of carbon emission and the investment for green initiatives.
Yes, indeed. I'm sorry, I had to have a break for 2 minutes. I'm so sorry. It's very important, and I think Rob Bressler has got the answer here. I think it's all about how do we measure. And I think Carol's right as well. We need to look at it from an accountancy viewpoint. Do we invest in the future of our planet, or do we allow it to cost the Earth? And that's what it's about. And I think companies have to look at their processes. If they do have a high carbon footprint and what they're doing is damaging the planet, I think they have a moral and an ethical obligation to fix it. And that's agriculture, food production, waste management. It's across the board. I don't think there's a simple answer, but I think Rob and Carol and Waleed's processes should be implemented. And I think Malaysia is in an ideal position where it can become a leader in the way it reduces its carbon, and it can show the rest of the world how it's done. Sorry, I'm not an expert in this field, but I'm sure Rob and Waleed and Carol have more information than me.
Sorry, I actually, one of the experience that we experience, actually, we can also look for the leasing program. For example, if you want to install a solar facility, in fact, there is a vendor to provide a leasing program and guarantee return and guarantee achievement for the certain amount you want to achieve. It's a very good investment. And also, like machine right now, if I want to change the machine, I need to predict or anticipate the 100% recyclable packaging, whereas maybe it's not happen now, and I want to have a flexibility, I can change it in the future. And leasing program actually is one of the good option that we can consider. And anytime you want to upgrade, it's actually with a lower cost.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, leasing is a key component of that circular economy. What we find is, people normally procuring something, they will run it and it will get worn out, it will break down, it will become less efficient. We know that driving old vehicles that aren't well maintained are going to cost you more in the long run. So a leasing program where someone else owns that item is maintaining it. You may pay a higher service charge, but the overall life cost is going to be cheaper.
Just to follow on that, Rob and Carol, about the leasing, for example, now big companies like, for example, like HP and Dell, printers, for example, now this is a service. You don't buy the printer. Buying the printer by itself was cheap, but to buy the cartridges or refill it was a problem. So now you just get the printer, you pay per paper. Already the printer is connected to HP headquarters. They know when the cartridge is going low. Once it's going low, they send you the brand new one, and also you can send the old cartridges, they refill it. And based on that, the company already knows about can actually maintain the product. It's less cost for the consumer. It's less waste, because if this breaks down, HP own that, so it will take it back, fix it. You don't have to get it out. And the leasing and sharing economy as part of the circular economy is growing fast around the world. And we have seen an example how successful it can be. I mean, you can see many in the last 5-10 years, how sharing and leasing economy has been growing fast. We have seen Airbnb, we have seen Uber, and we've seen a different example, Easy Share, and so on, because this is the future. The business model is changing, and therefore your business model need to look into that. Not only about the figure, how much I'm going to pay now, it's actually how I'm going to adapt to that new business models, because we are moving toward the circular economy. We're moving towards the green procurement. We're moving towards reducing our waste and our carbon. All these reduction and all these steps are coming along your way. So what are you doing about it? That's the question for anyone who is in the business or in the government. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Walid. I think it's very, very true. Now it's actually, we need to look at the business model to suit the future needs or even the current needs, and the circular economy, or even we have to look at sustainability when we do plans or, you know, manufacture items. We have to look into the 3 P's: people, profit, and planet, not purely profit. So sustainability is the keywords. Okay, so I think I have a question in the chat. Maybe this is for Carol. Can Dutch Lady milk powder packing, which is polymer laminated aluminium, recyclable?
Actually, we have the vendor helping us to recycle the aluminium foil or aluminium material, whereas it's not as common known that this is aluminium is recyclable. So we are working on to make it more 100% recyclable by 2025. This is our aim. So we are now working with the vendor to looking for an alternative material or alternative solution to resolve this issue. Whereas if we collect this thing back, we can actually send for our supplier to do the recyclable, but because it's limited, aluminium, normally they were just used for the zinc, the roof. It's not more, there's less option for us to recycle and to reuse it back.
I believe this is part of your roadmap.
Yes.
2028. So maybe later on we can also share again with us. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes more. So maybe we just go around the screen, on maybe just to give some tips how to get started for, you know, for various organizations or even for community. Okay, before that, there's a question here from Mr. Vincent. Hi, Mr. Rob. So I'm not sure whether Rob Bressler or Robert Birch. Okay. Hi, Mr. Rob. What is current trend of target setting by intensity or absolute emission? So maybe both of you can answer. We can start with Mr. Rob Bressler.
Yeah, I would say it depends on your industry. I think the intensity figure is very, very useful. It allows you to see how your organization is performing with growth. So if you know your emissions per kilogram of product manufactured or cars off production line, as your, you know, companies are always saying they want to get to net zero, but they're a growing business, so their emissions are going to increase. But it's a case of being able to decouple your emissions from your growth. So I think having what we call a normalizer is really, really important. So, you know, your accountants will know how many people they're servicing and what they're doing, but you need to then equate that against your carbon footprint. So, you know, how much carbon are you emitting per ton of waste collected? And if you can start decoupling that, you can see if you're on the right track or not. If not, it's very, very hard to measure. So that's really important. But the absolute figure is always key. You know, you're not, you know, to get the absolute figure, you're going to have to measure anyway. So you've got to, you know, you've got to get that data. So, you know, we do both, and that's something we encourage all of our users to do in that platform, because it's that decoupling that really matters. You know, we want to, you know, companies want to grow, we want to invest, we need to, you know, we need to evolve. But yeah, if we can unhook that, I mean, companies like Unilever, they've done that fantastically. You know, they're a growing business, they've gained global share, but they've managed to decouple their emissions from their growth, and that's really, really vital.
Okay, Mr. Robert Birch, you want to comment on this?
Yes, indeed. I think we can all learn from where other people are doing innovative things to save the planet. I'll just give you a couple of examples. I'm on my 4th hybrid car, which is, you know, they're wonderful, wonderful cars. They really are clever things. But we all know that batteries have a certain life before they become inefficient. And if you were to buy an electric or a hybrid car, you have to accept that after maybe 5 or 6 years, the batteries become less efficient. It's the technology we have today. In Canada, when you buy a car now, you don't own the batteries. Just as Waleed said, you lease them. So you own the car, but you don't own the batteries. So you pay, I don't know, I'm going to make it up, $100 a month to lease the batteries. And then after a few years, the car manufacturer replaces the batteries. So you have new batteries, they take the old ones away, they recycle them. And you as a driver notice no difference. You don't have any extra cost. And of course, we have an opportunity to reuse these batteries. Just anecdotally, doing some work with NASA, and I was talking to the guys at NASA a couple of weeks ago, and they have become so strict now on environmental management that if they buy anything, and procurement people can learn from this, if they buy anything at all, the manufacturer or the supplier must prove their environmental credentials. So I'll give you an example. So if NASA today were to buy a photocopier, let's say, they need to know how it was manufactured and how it's packaged. When the company deliver it, they're responsible for removing all packaging off site. So, and then NASA need to know what are the supplier going to do with the packaging. And if you can't answer the questions and prove that you're being environmentally responsible, they won't deal with you. So suppliers are now being forced to become more environmentally responsible. And I think it's a very, very good thing. And I think we should implement that globally, and suppliers should be forced to be environmentally responsible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Robert. I think that's the way forward. Leasing, and also the producer have to be responsible on the items that they produce. They have to, they have to be environmentally responsible. I think, like you mentioned, when we buy things, the supplier should get back the what you call it, the packaging materials, or even after the life cycle, they have to process it or dispose it. Yeah, I think we also have problems now. If let's see we have a lot of solar panels now being installed, but what happened after the life cycle? What happened after 21 years or 25 years? So maybe you have experience in UK. What do they do with the solar panel at the end of their lifespan?
Talking about the solar panels, for example, there has been many facilities now open to recycle. So most of the manufacturer, if they don't lease the solar panels, for example, for business or commercial enterprises, it's for households. They actually contact the owner, for example, and speak with them that by the end of, if there is any problem with the panels, they can take in and recycle that. So we have already many facilities in the UK that they can actually work. And this comes under the WE regulations as well, because all of these, like the solar panels at the moment, they are under the WE regulation, has to be collected and has to be reprocessed and not to be sent to the landfill. So this has been going, especially with the increase of usage of the solar panels around the UK. There has been an increase also in the waste management industry for recycling and recover some of the material, for example, the plastic, the metal frames, and so on. So there has been a lot of progress in that.
Okay, great. There's one question from Mr. Brian McPeace. As Walid points out, the 12 Malaysia Plan sets out to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. However, could Malaysia's emissions actually increase when we consider that greenhouse gas intensity is a correlation between the emissions and the economic value it produces? Thus, if the economy in Malaysia grows in the next 20 to 30 years, this will be a significant challenge for the targets. Do the panel have any view on this? So it's open to any panel. Okay.
I think Rob already answered kind of partially on that question, because saying about decoupling, you will have a decoupling growth, you will have decoupling of reduction of emissions. To give you an example, in the UK, for example, the government has announced that we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. And that means that our baseline is not like about now, or we started actually from 2005. So in 2005, we have less industries, we have less population, we were using still some of the fossil fuels. There was no increase on renewable energy. However, by 2050, the situation will be different in the UK. We'll have more cars, we'll have more people. The population could reach 100 million people in the UK. We are around 65 million at the moment. We'll have different industries. We'll have increase in energy demands. So all of that, while we're doing that target, the government has been putting a lot of programs in order to actually reduce the dependence on fossil fuels, for example, to increase energy efficiency, to increase, for example, the use of renewable energy. And in Malaysia, it has to be the same thing as well. It's not only the government will be doing this, but also the businesses. And I mentioned that, like, for example, looking into the energy efficiency and reduction of carbon from your waste or from your energy emissions, for example, or transport, these coming your way as well. And you have to bear in mind all of these targets, they are not done for today, 2020 or 2015 or 20. They have done previously as a baseline. So we take a year that we measure the carbon and we say we have to stick to that, and we reduce to that amount. So the government will have to do a lot of investment, a lot of incentive, the same as also businesses. So I think there is a lot of work, a lot of opportunities. I can see that, whether in terms of technology uptake, in terms of training, and most importantly, people understand and behavior change. Because in the end of the day, I always give that an example. You can have the best car in the world, Ferrari, McLaren, Formula One, for example, but if you don't know how to drive it, there's no point you can use it. And this is the case. Technology is one key, but the drivers, the human beings who use that technology, the people who actually have a different behavior, they actually need to understand why we're doing this and how we can do it. And this is where it comes like training. We're working with WMAM, for example, and the association to do many programs, and I believe Ben Sarifa will talk about that later. And it's important the people, you can get the best technology in the world, the best kit in the world, but without the person who can actually run it proper and get the best out of it, that won't happen.
Yeah, true. Very important. You can have a very, what do you call it, outstanding or very excellent technology, but you don't have the right driver, don't know how to use it, you cannot achieve the results. So maybe
in the UK, we've managed to decouple some of our emissions on a per person basis. I mean, if I look at my own home, the energy footprint of my home has changed dramatically. The lighting that I have now got is all LEDs, so my carbon footprint from there has gone. We have sensors that turn lights on and off. We've got better insulation in our homes, so we're using less fuel to heat or cool our buildings. I drive an electric car, so my footprint for commuting has changed dramatically. The way I purchase my energy now is from renewable provider. So the carbon footprint of my family, my home life has changed dramatically. And that's how we can do these things. We can grow, we can get more comfortable lives by the new modern technology, and things are evolving all the time. The efficiencies of our products, goods and services are getting better. But again, it comes back to what Lee was saying about education as consumers, making those choices, understanding that. And the key thing is for any manufacturer, the days of greenwashing are soon hopefully going to be behind us. People and consumers want to know more about their products and services and the data and what's behind them. And they'll soon get found out, and hopefully people are starting to vote with their wallets.
Yeah. Okay, Carol, you want to say a few words?
For me, because sustainability is not a short-term plan. It's not stopped by 2050 or another 10 years or 2060. it is continuous improvement for time to time. So if today we don't start, we don't close the gap, and eventually our gap will become bigger and bigger, then very difficult for us to catch up. Of course, I like this carbon net zero because it doesn't mean that we need to go for zero emissions, which is impossible, because we need emissions, we need energy, whereas that we need to balance ourselves for whichever that we use. Of course, eventually maybe you feel like your business expand by then. Also, if you have a very good supplier or your good partners, in fact, they also doing the carbon footprint reduction, or they have the sustainability plan. They in fact will help you to also grow in your carbon footprint reduction as well.
Okay, great. Mr. Robert Birch.
Yes, thank you. I think everyone's making very good points, and they're all absolutely correct. I think we lose track of the fact that we are all shareholders. We are shareholders because we are customers. Whether you're a shareholder and you invest money or you buy a company's products, you are a shareholder. And I think as shareholders, we must demand more from our suppliers. And if they will not, or if they will not change things to save the planet, then we can demand that they change their management. I'll give you an example. Here's one example. Those of us in the UK, I know Rob and Waleed would know this. One of our water suppliers, as an example, a company called Southern Water, is my water supplier. They've just been fined £90 million. That's $130 million for dumping raw sewage into rivers. £90 million. You'd think they'd learn, but the following day they did it again. Now, as customers, we should demand more. Absolutely demand more. In the UK, the water companies are now being fined if they don't repair leaks, which is just wasting water and creating so much carbon through replacement. If the water companies don't repair the leaks, they are fined, and they are not small fines. These fines will be in the hundreds of millions of pounds. So they're being forced to do things. And we as consumers, we as customers should demand more from our suppliers. And if we don't like what the suppliers are doing, don't buy their products. And I'll give you another example. Carol, you mentioned about milk production. Certainly in the UK, people now want to buy low-fat products. They want to buy semi-skimmed products. I understand that. But as a dairy producer, if you look at all the dairies around the world, they are taking the raw milk yield into their processes. They're creating low-fat products. Question, what are they doing with all the fat?
Dispose. But that we can look into the new technologies. So for us, it's actually the cooking process that can actually help to reduce the fat. But we don't really like dispose the fat, like take it out and dispose. So it's from the technology, how we cook and we burn the fat.
Yes, but from a manufacturing viewpoint, they are left with a lot of waste. The question is, what do they do with it? I know what they do with it because I've seen it. You'd be quite shocked when you know what they do with it. And as consumers, if we don't like it, we should tell our suppliers this is not good enough. It's not for me, but it's for our children and our grandchildren. Because if we don't deal with it now, they won't have these products. And we have to just remember that as global warming accelerates and takes place, certain regions of the globe will be uninhabitable. There'll be mass migration of people from areas that are too hot to inhabit. They will move to cooler areas, as will, and then you need to consider what effects that has. How will they farm? How will they rear animals? And without clean water and fertile land, they won't be able to do it.
In fact,
so we have a responsibility to deal with this.
Yes, indeed, because for us, the sludge from wastewater treatment plant, the sludge can be used for fertilizer. Then you can actually help for another farming usage, or you can utilize the sludge or dispose. And yet a lot of things that you can also send for animal feed. So you can reuse it back.
I understand that, Carol. In the EU, you can't spray sludge onto farmland anymore. It's illegal. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Does the panelists mind if, let's say, we continue for another few minutes, because there are few questions here. I think, is it okay for us to extend the time a bit for all the speakers? Okay,
Yeah,
panelists?
that's fine.
All right.
Yep,
Okay,
fine.
from Vimalan Arumugan. A question to all respective panelists. Can I know the view towards e-waste from abroad being exported to be recycled from abroad, being exported or to be recycled illegally in developing nation in Asia, which include Malaysia? What could be the solution to overcome this growing problem of e-waste? So maybe Mr. Robert or Rob?
Yeah,
okay,
so
I'll go first. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go first? All right, thank you. I'll go first. I am aware in Britain, we have the facility to recycle mobile phones. If you go into any phone shop, they usually have a cardboard bin or a dustbin to dispose of your old mobile phones. These phones are sent abroad to China or Vietnam by the million, as you can well imagine. And children are being given rudimentary tools like just a screwdriver. And what they do is they break the phones apart, and their job is to remove any precious metals, any gold or copper or titanium within that mobile phone. When they've removed that and the batteries, they literally just throw the phone in the river. We have evidence of rivers in China and Vietnam that are now so polluted that no marine life can survive. So I'm sure you can imagine my view on this subject. Again, it's down to the suppliers. The suppliers should be responsible for the life of their product.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of more stringent UK legislation coming through in terms of how products are designed and being designed for being dismantled and recycled. So I think that's going to be key in terms of some of the CE standards and what these things are. But I also mentioned it in the chat. In the UK, we're putting in a nationwide waste tracking tool, which is going to be mandatory. So this will mean that waste crime from exporting illegal e-waste abroad will become a harder crime to commit. We've already done such things in terms of metal waste. So in the UK, waste metal trading was done via cash, and there was no authorities. There was lots of metal theft. So by having this kind of data tracking blockchain systems to track waste will actually just make that whole system a lot harder. But again, going back to education, we've recently, I mean, if you actually go on to, if you type Amazon and then /recycling, we've actually produced some training for Amazon that educates children on what they should be doing with their e-waste, what they should be doing with their batteries and these kind of things. We've got very stringent recovery targets on batteries and electrical waste, because these are valuable materials. There's resource scarcity issues going on with that, so there's a huge amount of encouragement to bring those materials in. So it's taking us a long time to get there, but hopefully all of these areas will become cheaper and easier and better for us to be able to manage. And I think as a so-called developed nation, one thing that we should be doing is if our tracking tools and systems are working, then this should be something that should be provided for free to as many different countries as possible, so they can utilize it and also prevent this waste crime happening elsewhere.
Okay, I think in Malaysia, we have this Department of Environment monitoring the e-waste from the industries. However, I think we have problems in monitoring the e-waste from the households. And another issue is on the recovery of those e-waste from the households. So what are the better way of handling this household e-waste?
I can answer that. Just going back to the question quickly and to add what Robert and Rob were saying, actually, two things here. So I was involved in a similar program. You mentioned that Asian countries are actually taking the e-waste mostly, but it was actually a few years ago, it was West Africa. So to give you an information, like in Lagos, this what we call it Alaba market is the biggest e-waste market in the world. We have over 3,000 vendors. I was working on a project with several stakeholders such as HP, Sony, Philips, because you have to understand these manufacturers don't want to be seeing their brand, and you will see a lot of documentary on YouTube by BBC or DW or CNN going into these areas where people, as Robert mentioned, they burn actually the e-waste in order to extract the metal like copper, for example, or aluminum. That also has all the health implication on the people who lives there. So these manufacturers in working with Basel Convention Centers in Nigeria, for example, and other countries, they start doing programs in two things. One is a program here to tackle the e-waste crime by making that is more harder for illegal export. And that's by tracking all the waste leaving the UK, as Rob said earlier. The second part is working with the governments and the dealers who working in these countries in order to give them technology they can actually recycle these e-waste proper, and B is to give them education in order to understand the health and environmental impact from non-environmentally recycling method use, for example, like burning the mobile phones or breaking, for example, the LCD screens and so on. Because by doing this, you're actually releasing the toxic into your local environment. I'm not saying that this will have a stop to it. Has actually slowed the amount of illegal activities of e-waste, but we have to understand that the amount of electrical and electronic equipment we have around the world is, even as the United Nations announced this year, is actually in weight is equivalent even more heavier than the Great Wall of China. Because if you think about, we are doing this conference through Zoom. So we're using your laptop, your mobile. There is a server somewhere in the world to do this. We have already cables to take all of the electricity and also the data. We have servers. So e-waste is now more and more increasing even in the households. So talking about the export, that's one issue. Households comes through two things. One is in the UK, for example, we have increased awareness within the local authorities and people living in the household that not to throw away all the electronic waste. There are collection points, for example, in the local recycling centers, or for example, things like take back schemes. If you buy a new fridge, they can take your old fridge for free and so on. I mentioned the lease, for example. So there has been different business models. Now is how this can be adopted. There are simple solutions, the same thing, as long there is a support, and I can see the support as mentioned in the government plans by, for example, starting a new scheme of taking e-waste, big e-waste, like for example, appliances like freezers, for example, fridges and cooker and washing machines to be recycled for free, because one of the biggest impact or cost in that about recycling these big appliances is the collection cost. So these can be actually adopted in these countries in order to make it easier and so on. So I hope that answered the different questions that was in the chat and yours. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so I think this is the end of our session. It's really grateful that we have just enlightening facts and figures and knowledge from the experienced speakers, panelists. So if you feel that you have increased your level of knowledge from at least 1 to 2, you can type Y in the chat. And then maybe we can also show our appreciation to the panelists by typing 8. So say thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, and we hope we can meet again in near future. And also please stay tuned of our WMAM next program that we are going to work closely with Dr. Walid under circular learning, and then you will get a certificate under this training program. It is under IEMA, which is Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. So this is very useful. So we will launch it soon. I think should be in November or end of this month. So please stay tuned. We will update everyone. And then and also we also have other training. Our last training will be in December also on the waste technologies.
November, end of November.
Oh, end of November. Okay, so we will have on waste various technologies as well. So thank you very much to all the panelists, and we hope we can meet again. And to all the participants, we really hope that you gain a lot of benefits from this session, and maybe you can start looking at your baseline baseline carbon emission, so that you can establish, like what Mr. Rob Dressler, he has started from his own home with his family, monitoring his own carbon emission. Wow, I'm amazed. So this is a man that talking by example, it's not no action talk only. It's leading by example. So let us start, do our baseline, calculate our carbon footprint. There's so many way of calculating. You can even Google carbon footprint calculator to know your carbon footprint. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Before we leave, could we take a picture with everyone, even the participants?
Okay, can on your video?
Yeah, can on your camera.
We will put this in our website and Facebook, and also you will get the recorded session.
Yes.
Okay.
So the session has been recorded and we'll send it out to everyone, yeah? Okay, so everyone smile.
Like spend Christmas with grandma, right? Wouldn't that be nice?
Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Smile, everyone. Okay, I got it. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you soon, hopefully, for the next session, and maybe in person, hopefully. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, have a great week.